this week's episode of This Week in Indies, we chat about info dumping. Writing is a lot of fun. There is a lot that goes into a story, but how do you know when too much information is enough? How do we know what needs to be cut out? We'll answer these questions and more as we sit down at the round table with an excellent panel of authors. Then get ready for this week's Indie Connection as C.L. Cannon brings us books written by indie authors similar to Gearbreakers by Zoe Hana Mekuta. From mysteries to an up-and-coming romance where life and death collide with nature, we spend the final 5 minutes with author W.L. Hawkins as she shares a glimpse into her world. So, sit back and grab a cup of coffee, get comfortable, hit that like button, and subscribe if you haven't already. Here's your host for today's show, Madilynn Dale. Hello, everyone, and I'm going to apologize again. I have a little bit of a delay today. I'm going to blame the extremely heavy winds Oklahoma is having this morning. I am Madilynn Dale. I'm excited to be back with you guys again this week to talk about such a fun topic, avoiding info dumps. That's actually really hard for writers to do when creating a story. But before we dive into the topic, let's meet our group of authors for the week. Hey, guys.
Hi.
Hi.
So we're going to go around and I want you to tell our viewers a little bit about you, what you write, and we'll go from there. We are going to start with JD.
Oh my God, I'm so ready. Greetings, fellow humans. I have 2 cups of Go Indie goodness, and I've got the socks on for Go Indie now because I'm ready, and it's always time to go Indie now. My name is JD Estrada. I'm a Puerto Rican indie author who decided to move to Atlanta because I wanted to see the real-life world premiere of The Walking Dead, apparently. And apart from that, I do write nonfiction, urban fantasy, middle grade fantasy, poetry, horror, and A Partridge in a Pear Tree, and more to come.
Yeah.
What a lineup. So my name's Adam Gaffin. I am primarily a science fiction author. I also do editing. My most recent book, which is The Ghosts of Tantori, of course you can't see it because I have the fake background up, just won an award for, it's the number 11 best indie book of 2022. And very excited to be on the show, and kind of sad not to be on the show next week, but I'm going to be at a convention with.
Woo, woo.
I'm sorry. So sorry. Oh, wait.
All right, Jim.
I am Jim Nettles. I write science fiction, urban fantasy, bit of horror, bit of this, that, and the other. I also write a lot of nonfiction. I teach workshops on business for authors, work in a number of different publishing companies, publishing industry stuff. We teach workshops. I am tech director, VP for the Continual Online Convention, which, of course, we do stuff with Go Indies. And I also host the Creating Prose podcast. And I feel sure I do something else. Speculative Fiction Academy. I'm also the business track director for the speculative-fiction-academy.com. Come learn your shit. See, I got it in early.
Yep.
Wow, I'm like shocked. Not about the language, but just the depth of people who are here, and that's awesome. My name is W.L. Hawkins, go by Wendy, and I'm an author, genre blending author from the west coast of Canada. I'm out here on the edge of Vancouver Island, and love it. And I write couple of things. I've got a Hollystone mystery series that is urban fantasy mystery thriller, and I also just released a romantic suspense novel last year. I've got a YA lighthouse mystery coming up, And I'm also dabbling in creative nonfiction right now. So,
Ooh. And Patrick?
Hey, I am Patrick Dugan. I am a science fiction fantasy author. I also own Distracted Dragon Press and am the executive publisher for Educated Dragon Press, both small imprints from our personal brand. I also am the tech director for Authors Essentials and a full-time computer programmer and father to 2 kids and a spunky dog.
Nice. Well, thank you everybody for volunteering to be on the show today. This is going to be so much fun. So before we get started, viewers, we're going to go through some comments and see who's here. And don't forget to hit that like button while you're here. So we've got Anita hanging out with us today, Vanessa, and JD breaking the fourth wall. Vanessa says, I'll be up and down packing things, but I'm listening. Oh. I hate, she's had a lot of tornado damage from recent weather. So Karina is here. Hey, Karina. Anita, and very nice socks, JD. Books by Tiffany is hanging with us. And then JD is breaking the fourth wall on Facebook as well. Dude, those are some awesome socks, JD.
Yes, they are. And they're comfy.
Yes. So, guys, let's kind of start with a basic question. What is an info dump and why is it bad?
All right, JD, you're the expert. So,
Okay.
JD.
The cheeky comment is because when we were debating what the topic we were going to choose for this week, it was between two. And I'm like, I've sucked before at info dumping. So if I'm an expert at info dumping, it's because I've done it before. Info dump is when you need to progress your story. You need the backstory. You need the foundation. And rather than do it in an organic way, you just put like this huge chunk of 6 pages of information that is almost like a dissertation. And when you're writing for entertainment and to engage people in a story, doing that is a no-no. I've gotten way better at it. And actually, from the first version of Only Human to the second version to the final draft of Only Human, it did improve a lot. And people say, wow, that first part was chunky. And I'm like, you should have seen the original manuscript. That first one was hella chunky, but I was figuring it out. And until you read it and you go like, damn, that's too long or that's too much stuff, you don't realize how bad it can be.
Yeah.
Yeah. An author that I love, and I won't name him, writes science fiction, has been doing it for many years, won lots of awards, sold hundreds of thousands, millions of books, is terrible about info dumping because the story's moving along. Like JD was saying, you got the story moving along and it's going and it's going and it's going and it's good. And then there's this big technical pile of information that he feels you absolutely have to have at this moment, otherwise you're not going to understand it. And that might be a valid point. But it's like, it's like if you're driving a car and, driving an old manual and you accidentally downshift instead of from fourth to third, you downshift from fourth to first. Yeah. It just kills you. It kills you. It takes you right out of the book.
Yeah. That is
I'm actually going to take a little bit of a different take on it. I know that's a shocker.
always
so-
Not you, Jim.
Yeah, I know, me pick a fight. So I think it depends. It depends on a couple of things. Depends on the genre you're writing in. It depends on the expectations of your audience, and it depends on sometimes the need of the story. Because if you are in, and it also depends on the length of the work. If you're in a short story, if you start an info dump, that's your story. If you're writing some piece of epic fantasy that's 800 pages long, and you need a 2-page info dump because and Bob begat John, who begat this, 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 who begat JD, who begat, if we go through this long string like this, occasionally that can fit into the genre. Or if sci-fi is really rife with info dumps, and sometimes it's appropriate because it's both things that the readers want to get. So maybe you do an info dump about here's how the warp drive works in my universe. But the reason I'm telling you this is because somewhere down the line it's going to break. It's not going to work right, because the Heisenberg compensator is going to get clogged because the carburetor, flipped and we don't have the spare part. If you're doing the info dump, you can do them very sparingly, but as long as it's important. I mean, you're much better off if you've got a lot of information to dump. And a lot of people go and say, oh, that wasn't an info dump. That was world building. That is wrong. If you are coming in and you're doing world building, this is where you have to have that debate of show or tell. And sometimes you just need to tell people, a war has been going on here for 10,000 years over spice, which, transforms people into these things. Maybe you just need to do that to catch people up. Maybe because you're in a series and now you're skipping forward because the original series was 500 years ago. Now you're leaping forward, 500 years, and you want to say, yeah, since that last little war, there's only been a couple of border skirmishes, but peace has reigned upon the land, as you remember from the last time. Yeah, there can be uses for it, but again, it needs to be sparing. I am much more a supporter of when you need to do an info dump, have it as a conversation between people, or have it because you're looking up the information on a computer system. You are something like this instead of the 1980s narrative we used to see in a lot of films, which was, and in the beginning, the scroll goes on for 12 minutes and is your opening credits. So again, to ramble on, this is a good sign of an info dump.
I agree. I agree with all of those points. Sorry. I find a lot of people, I do a lot of reviews, and I can always hear it when there's a switch of a voice and it moves into a narrative voice that's telling me something. And so that show don't tell is a really good way to see it. But I see a tendency for people who do a lot of research, and I always set my books in different countries and sometimes different timelines. I mean, I've got a time travel book that was in 200 BC. So there's a lot of information. So I go and I do all of this research. And so there's a tendency for people to want to just dump all that research they did because, it was great research and it was interesting to them. But you have to be really, really careful of how you put it in. And the show don't tell is a really good way to do it. Conversations are a good way to do it. That's probably a question coming later in the show, I know, but it is part of it, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Conversations are fantastic. Like Jim was saying, and like you were just saying, conversations are a fantastic way to get information out because it's what we do anyways. I mean, it's what we're doing here. We're sharing information, and, Jim did an info dump.
You're welcome. I figured I was showing, not telling. Oh, showing and telling.
Patrick,
Because you're on
add
video.
in to any of this?
Well, I was going to say, it was really nice of Jim to give us a great example of an info dump. and I really needed that cat nap, so that was good. I think so. Where I would go is with hard science fiction, especially. I think the readers are much more attuned to the technical details that are going into a story, so you can get away with it more. In my first book, Stormforged, I had to get all the world building out, but luckily my team was sitting in history class in one scene, and so I got to kind of teach it to the class, and the reader just got to go along for the ride. So, but I think that you really have to be careful with how much, and really what I would say is write it, write everything you want to write, and then edit out 99% of it. So get it out of your system, put it into, Word docs, put it into your Evernote files, do something, and then, then go back and cherry pick the good stuff.
Yes. We've got a couple of people joining in late. A.O. Mingle, good afternoon, everyone. A little late, but here. And then JD and Vanessa are talking about his socks. And this is a question for Jim. Jim, are you in the witness protection program again, the man behind the curtain?
I am not.
Or maybe there's a kill room behind the black curtain.
Perhaps.
That's what prologues are for, all the world building from Anita. Um,
So
and-
Vanessa, let us know how it's going with the insurance claim again. And no, this is actually I'm doing a test run down in the new studio where we're going to be doing a bunch of stuff. So
yes.
the kill room is underneath the house, lined in plastic, where we can just hose it all down.
There you go. That's the
Smart.
best way to do it, right? And then Courtney Cannon's joining us too. So, guys, our next question is: are there any good examples of a bad info dump?
There are countless
Yeah.
examples of bad info dumps. And before that, I was going to say that people associate directly an info dump as a bad thing. The thing is that if you make it compelling, it can be a good thing. To give you one example of a bad info dump, there's, I think it was The Brass Giant, a book that was first indie release and then was released by a publisher. Okay. What was compelling in this story? Yeah, I gave it 2 stars, by the way. And it's not shitting on the person. It's that my expectations were not met because I was expecting steampunk and stuff like that. And I was like, yes, I haven't dabbled into this genre. Okay. So when they went to the mechanics of how an automaton worked, I was super fascinated by the explanation, like clockwork and stuff like that, because it's someone who actually studied engineering. And you can see the passion there. Passion, interest. They make it compelling. They make it interesting about mechanics and stuff. That's really interesting. It's no dialogue, no exposition, no relationship, no anything. No, it was a very compelling explanation. Awesome. Then every single time there was an explanation about the relationship and the copper eyes, because this is a romance veiled as a steampunk, that's when I would cringe. And the relationships, when you reveal a relationship in a way with an info dump, that just kills the story, because rather than let us experience it and live it like a proper memory, you just give us like a synopsis of a relationship, of a life or 2 lives that come together in a story. That book, yeah, if you like romance, it's good. If you like steampunk,
Yeah.
I think if you look at things like Dune, if you read through Frank Herbert and Dune, there are a ton of info dumps throughout because it's already a massive tome and there is a tremendous amount of history they're trying to cover in, I won't say a short period of time because there's nothing short about the story. But there are times when you look at the info dump and you're like, you've already seeded parts of that through. With a couple of sentences, you could have taken the info dump that was paragraphs long, because you've already built that into the world. You may not know why that was already in the world, but you knew it was in the world. And by making a couple of sentences, because by having House Atreides come in, you've got new people coming to the planet, you can ask a couple of questions or have a statement that says, well, we do that because X. A lot of the time what we see is, again, we're trying to show exactly how much research we did and how smart we are as writers. We really aren't, but we probably did a lot of research, and in wanting to tell people we did all the research, we tend to overshare. And I think that's usually what we see. But I mean, for me, if you look again, a lot of the classic science fiction, there's a number of cases throughout Dune where they could have, a good edit would have trimmed those down significantly. And there were a lot of opportunities in all the different cultural conversations that could have shared the exact same information just differently. And I think that's another example I'd look at.
Yeah, actually, going back to Dune, and a good example is when they're introduced to the Imperial planetologist, and he gets to present a whole bunch of information. So Frank Herbert was able to do this info dump all about the planet, but in a very natural way, a very
right.
And another one, again, not naming the author, but he was giving some backstory, some history between the relationship between humans and an alien species. And he actually more or less wrote a complete little story within the larger novel. So he gave you the info dump, he gave you all the information, but he wrote it in such a way that it was really cleverly done, and it was this little gem of a story within the larger arc, and you didn't feel like you were just being presented with information after information after information.
And I think a lot of the classics sci-fi are really egregious with the info dumps. And I think I think some authors go with that it adds a level of authenticity if you can go in and explain something, like in minute detail. But the problem is that I don't think it does. I think what it does, it bores your reader. And if you're lucky, all they do is flip past what you wrote. And if you're not lucky, they shut the book and throw it away and never buy another book you wrote. So I really think that, in really, like, Heinlein was horrible for info dumps, but it now would be considered kind of lazy writing, because it's an easy way to get the information out so that you don't have to do the hard work of layering it back into the story and having it naturally get to your reader. Or there are people who think their readers aren't smart enough to pick up on all these nuanced facts if they scatter them around, so they figure they have to force feed it so they know how it works later. I think both are wrong.
Yeah. A.M. Engel says this comes down to story pacing. The info needs to be in the story, but the author has to weave it in to pace the story correctly. Just a couple more comments. Dune feels like a history from another galaxy again, long but compelling if you're into that. As said earlier, there are some appropriate uses for short info dumps. Do you have any suggestions on how to decide when you can put it in or when you should do the sprinkle method? And like JD I think that's a good point. A lot of info dumps feel as if it's A, justifying the research, and B, showing off and trying to feel fancy. By the way, info dumps are not to be confused with over-describing. I'm looking at you, Jules Verne. And then Ale Mingle, there's the bar. Again, can you add some Tabasco, please? Which do you guys have more thoughts on that last question before we move to the next one?
On Tabasco, yeah, we can.
Well, not the Tabasco.
Yeah, I mean,
Tabasco.
Are you talking about the last,
it up all day.
the last question you asked?
Yes, the one about giving a good example of a bad
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not a sci-fi, sorry guys, writer. I'm more along the fantasy lines. But I think I see a lot of times where people try and give a whole lot of background to the character in the beginning of a book because they want to introduce them, they want to tell their life story. And please don't do that.
No.
And that is one of the real critical things, right?
Well, and I think one of the things that goes with that is the idea that when you walk into a story, it's better just to get hooked on the person. What's going on? What does a normal day look like? Because we all have past. We all have, we may have future, but we all have past. And you're never going to know all of that past because not all of that's relevant to who you are as a person. Well, the same thing with a character. If you see somebody in a given setting, if you've set up the setting right, that will infer a great deal about the world they're in, where their place is in life, kind of what's going on. If you kind of do that initial setup in the first few pages of here's what normal life is before we screw it all up. Think about walking into the Shire. Think about the difference when you look at The Hobbit versus you look at the Lord of the Rings trilogy. There's about as much information in The Hobbit as there is in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. It was just describing a whole lot more of the walk along the way. Now that I have pissed off all of the Tolkien fans.
But it's true. Tolkien did sin because of info dumps. But that brings you to an interesting point. We've offered a lot of examples of classic literature. Frank Herbert being the most recent, Tolkien and other examples being further along. Most of the classics that people adore and revere, and this is awesome. They do info dumps. They abuse adverbs. They abuse lists. The worst way to do an info dump is to do and then he got this and that and that and that. And if you see Peter Pan and The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, there's clear examples of listing off stuff that you go 3 pages ahead. It's what did it matter? No, it didn't.
Yeah.
But he
That's
needed to hit word
I
count.
think styles have changed a lot. And I mean, if you read even like Lord of the Flies and those kinds of books, and we've also changed narrators now and viewpoints. And so, in the old days, you could do omniscient and get away with it. And Lord of the Flies is a good example of that. Whereas now, we're way into a place where there's a lot of people who are looking at our work, and editors and people telling us how we're supposed to write now, which can be good or bad, but there's a trend to now you don't do this. Now you come in medias res. Now you go right into the action, and they're telling us you have to do that. Now you have to do limited omniscient, or scene by scene, or first person if you're writing this genre, which I don't know. I mean, I think that it's a little bit trendy.
Yeah. Two other examples of classic authors who they're revered again. But if you tell me that H.P. Lovecraft doesn't occasionally do like a massive info dump about Yahweh and blah and stuff that you need phlegm to pronounce, and if you say that Edgar Allan Poe was always succinct, you're kidding yourself. Sometimes, some Poe's short stories could have been 12 pages shorter, and it would have been. It's debatable if it would have been better. It's a classic. It's enjoyed, and it all goes down to, man, just do what you enjoy. Realize and recognize that things have changed, but at the end of the day, just because trends have changed and things are trendy and suggestions and how to sell more books and lists like that are a dime a dozen. At the end of the day, just make it compelling. If you do a compelling info dump, people won't give a shit. They will read it and they will quote it, and some people will memorize it and use it in their English class or for like forensics and stuff. Oh, I learned this, whatever. How many people, going back to Dune, how many people know the Litany of Fear?
Yeah,
that's not an info dump. It's super compelling, by the way, and I love it.
I was like, yeah, don't know what that is, so I'll have to look it up.
Where Paul has his hand in the box with the Joan bar at his neck. So fear is the mind killer.
Ah.
Well, the whole
that was one of the other things, because I've actually used this before, where you can create a poem or a song or something like that that's in the narrative and use that as a way of being an info dump, because we're all used to songs and poems telling our histories.
Mm-hmm.
We're used to them going and telling us and carrying us on a narrative. So this goes back to that style of being compelling. I don't think info dumps are inherently evil, because when I write sci-fi, sometimes that's the easiest thing to do, is do a 1 or 2 paragraph info dump. An info dump doesn't have to be pages and pages, Stephen King. It can just be a paragraph or 2.
Well, I think there's a huge difference between a 1 or 2 paragraph info dump and a 2 or 3 page info dump where, people start going, oh my God, what is going,
Right. Or the 10 or 12 page info dump.
Yes.
Or the prologue gives you all the history of the world.
Yeah. That actually kind of brings us to the next question. Are there any good tricks for info dumping without losing your audience?
Having somebody who is a novice, or to go back to Dune, I guess we're going to do the Dune show. When Paul lands on Dune for the first time, everything's new. So he is, you're seeing it through his eyes. So he can ask questions because he doesn't know. And so by I think that's why a lot of people like to use younger protagonists, because, they're learning. So as they're learning, the author's got a chance to kind of slide some information in through them asking questions like, well, why do we, mine spice? Well, Paul, good idea. This is why, and you can get away with that a little more.
Yeah. Conversations, especially between an expert and a novice, asking questions, why are we doing this? Explain this to me. I don't know what's going on. That helps get the information, because again, it's occurring naturally within the flow of the story, because character A needs to know it and character B needs to tell it.
I wrote a short story a number of years ago, written from the perspective of the mentor about to send the hero on his journey. And that's what the whole thing was. And the setup was, you get to ask 3 questions. And so the first question is the blah, 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 blah. And he gives a quick little explanation of what's going on. The second question, he comes in, da, 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 da. He goes on his merry way. And he asks the third question. And the third question is basically am I going to die while I'm doing this? And he goes through the mental exercise of, should I tell him about this? Should I tell him about that? If I tell him that, that's going to talk him out of it. If I could tell him, no, I shouldn't do that because that'll lead to this, to this, to this. And he finally just looks at him and goes, nope, that's it. Good luck. And I mean, that's the it's a short story, which is predominantly an info dump. But if you were reading the script from the hero's perspective, it would have been about 2 paragraphs. From the mentor's perspective and all the mental gymnastics and everything else, it's about 3 pages. But none of it happens in dialogue. And it's just a snarky way in his head of going, look, kid, you're bothering me. You just need to go and do this already and good luck. And watching the mental gymnastics. But I mean, I think that the easiest things we play with are have a conversation, ask the computer. You know, if I go back to like, Time Machine and how they did it in the movie. The one from early 2000s, where Orlando Jones's character is the computer and the technology walking along and saying, yeah, well, you're from the past. This is how we got to here. What's your next question? Those kinds of things where you're interacting with the technology, or where you've got somebody that's acting as that professorial or that mentor going in, recounting the history to the kids, and your protagonist over here is the parts they need to know.
I got 2 tips. One, and this is basic stuff that most people can do. Microsoft Word has an option where it can read back to you what you wrote. Don't select a long text, just select a chunk of text. If when the read back, you pick up your phone to check Instagram, go back and tweak it. This is supposed to be compelling enough for you, the writer, to give enough of a damn to not be easily distracted. Second off, double down on a character's voice. This speaks a little to what Jim was saying and to the examples that we've offered. When you speak, the difference between a compelling info dump and just an info dump that has corn and other kernels of the dump is that it has personality, it has flavor, and no other character could have said it that way. If you can achieve that, and if you double down on your character, that also helps you build the character and develop your character better at the same time. And that's part of what I did with Only Human. Daniel Montager is a vampire, and he does this wonderful, massive info dump. But the first thing that I did was to switch and just to try to make it in a way that anyone else who would have said the information would have sounded different. He would have touched on different topics. He would have reminisced on other stuff or lingered on a memory a little more. And, just knowing your character and doing it in a way that only they can do it, I think, is a good option.
That's an interesting comment about the voice too. So I've got a couple of things there too. One is if you're writing in third person and you're writing a scene, it's really good if you switch into first person and rewrite it all in first person so that you're right in that person's head. And that one keeps it in the viewpoint. But also when your narrative voice comes in and starts going, and this is why this is happening, then you can cut that out. Another thing, talking about giving information like that, you mentioned vampires, Estrada, and sorry, I have to call you Estrada because my character's name is Estrada. And one of the things I did is actually called in Surrender Raven, I called the chapter a vampire primer. And then I have one of the older vampires sort of teaching again the new guy, the new person he's just turned, how things work. And that seemed to work for me too, because I knew I had to do that. There had to be a way to get all this, like how we do it differently across. Sorry, my dog has decided to play with her chew toy now.
That's a good point. Yeah. Any other thoughts on that, guys?
Oh, that I'm super happy that a character's name is Estrada.
Yeah, that is really cool.
And he's a super villain.
So a couple more comments over here on, I shared this. Scrivener can read back your stuff too, if that's what you use. A.M. Mingle says you can also read your work out loud, which is what I do. That's a good suggestion, WL. And JD adds, always works, Andy, but I say the computer because it lacks the intonation you have. You can read something so compellingly, a computer will just read it back. It's true.
You can read a phone book, and if you give it pauses and if you give it something like that, you can make it even sound sexy. 787-482, blah blah blah. It's like, you can list off ingredients, but if you use your husky voice and you go for the ASMR.
I thought we were going to talk about your phone sex operator history there, JD.
Oh, Lord.
that is old news. That is past.
You are way too much like my character. I gotta say. Okay?
No, I really gotta read you.
Yeah.
By the way, quick question, and is it because of Eric Estrada or another Estrada?
Oh no, actually, it was a student of mine way long ago, about 15 years ago, and his last name was Estrada, and I just loved the name so much. I was like, okay, I have to have a character named Estrada. And when this guy arrived, he just arrived fully loaded, and he's just stayed with me forever. Yeah.
I dig it.
Nice. So are there situations that are basically like it's a good, like info dumps are good? Like what kind of situations would that fit?
I can speak to that a little bit because I've been thinking about this. In a series, okay, it becomes really tricky. And I write a series. I'm on book 5 right now. And I have to figure out how to give enough information in each book because each of my books stand alone, and I have to give enough information so that if somebody's picking up book 4, they know what's going on. And I have had people actually read in reverse order. So they go 4, 3, 2. And they have said, there's enough here that I can tell what's going on without having to read all of the books ahead. Like, when you binge watch season 2 of a new series and you're like, oh, I have to watch season 1 again first. I do that anyway. So that's one. But I say that because I have picked up books in a series. Say I pick up book 4 in a series and I have no idea what's going on because they have not done any info dumping. There's no information there at all. And I'm trying to figure out who these people are, how they're related, what I missed, and the important bits of it. So if you're writing in a series, you have to be able to pull the bits out as they come and put them in there somehow in a conversation or in some way so that people don't get lost.
Yeah, although I would argue that that's not so much an info dump as an info sprinkle, especially in the first few chapters of the book in the series, because I've written a series as well, and as you go on, just like you said, bringing in those threads from before, you're not liable to get the big chunk of information. As for but when you're talking about the stereotypical info dump, I would say that's kind of your high fantasy and your hard sci-fi. There are going to be times, like Jim has said, there are going to be times where you need to let people know that this is a completely different world. And here are all the ways, or at least all the important ways, that it is completely different. And you need to remember these because they're going to be important. They're going to be on the quiz later.
So I think I really like, I really like, if you're writing a series, Butcher actually, I think, does it really well because he has gotten to the point, 15 or 17 books in, where he actually just writes a chapter at the beginning and says, here's a reminder of what's happened to this point. And I think that especially with longer series, and I tend to write books that you really have to have read the one before it. So I don't spend a lot of time trying to, I'll bring up points from the last book to make sure that people remember what happened, but I'm not trying to seed it so that somebody can go in and pick up book 3 and then go, oh yeah, I'm going to go backwards. If I was doing a much longer series, I think I would adopt what Butcher does, which is just basically like, to this point, we have done this. So if you want to jump in late in the series, you at least have the backstory that you know where it is. So, if you're stuck in the airport with nothing else to read but book 12, you can still enjoy it because you can read what happened beforehand to set up this book.
Another thing is okay, an info dump is a chunk of information. How can you divide that chunk of information in 3, 4, 5 segments, and then give the reader a little bit at a time? Because the problem with an info dump is that it's just overdoing what you need to do. So if you give too much of a dose of a medication to someone, you can kill them. But if you give the right dose, that's exactly what they need.
Well, go ahead, Adam.
I was just going to throw in a particularly clever one. Dave Weber in his Safehold series, in the back of the books, he puts a list of the cast. He puts the cast of characters, and he has a little bit of information about each character and what they've done and how they're related to each other. So if you pick up book 6 in that series for whatever reason, it's the only thing available in the airport. You can start reading it and go to the back of the book and say, oh, here's this person. He's, they're related to this one by this reason. And it puts control back into the reader's hand.
Yeah, I like that. I do that too. I have a cast of characters because there's the original Coven, and then in each book, because they're traveling, there's always new characters coming in. So I always try and do that. And in the front, I put a pronunciation guide. So right off the top, people know how to say things. Because one of my pet peeves is finding a book with words in it that I pronounce wrong. And then at the end of it, I'm like, what? I pronounced that wrong the whole time. It just bugs me.
Yeah, and especially with some of the series, some of the things I've done before, like I've got a series where there is a tome of books that are involved. And the way that I started doing it was I would actually write the full-blown info dump, which would be 2, 3, 4 pages. And then I would skim through it to go and say, okay, what are the things that are prescient to what they need to know here and now? And, trim it down to a couple of paragraphs. So I'm reading the book, skimming through, and something about something about something. Here's the paragraph I need. Put that in, something. Oh, and this. And by doing that, you get the full info dump out of your system. You've got the full text to come back and reference later if you need to pull that in to a later point. Go, wait, wasn't there something in that book about X? And you go pick it back up. Oh, and it becomes an easier way of also salting the info dump through, but also pruning out the stuff that doesn't matter. And it is one of those things, again, that's kind of a cheat, whether you use the computer to do it, you have a book to do it. You even have a mentor to do it, where the person's sitting next to the campfire going, oh my God, he will not shut up. He is droning on. Oh, wait, did he say something about that 3 days ago? There's ways of creating it and show your person tuning out and not paying attention.
Those are good points. And a couple of comments on that. Over here in our comment section, I lost it. Hold on. The chat has been super active. So here we go. Karina was talking about, I do that. You have to place it in slowly when the part of the book needs that history, talking about sprinkling it. And then AL says, exactly, Wendy, I pulled that in my series so the books can be standalones and read in any order, but also if readers read them in order, it will explore different relationships more deeply. And I agree, Adam, my sci-fi, I probably did some info dumping, but it was a 1,000-page, 2-novel story written and released as one work. And there were sequences that I had to describe the world. And he goes on to say, too, in my novel, Ballet of the Crypt Dancer, I formed it like a playbill with a cast list. And in my novel, The Blood Decanter, it opened with a glossary of terms. So that's neat. Yeah. And what were you going to say, Adam?
I was going to say, I don't think that describing your worlds is definitely info dumping, because I think you look at Jordan, he does a lot of really detailed descriptions, and I wouldn't consider those info dumps. I think that is, if you're giving details to what things look like, smell like, sound like, they can be info dump if you go on too long. But there are people who really enjoy a good solid description to form it in their brain correctly. and then other people prefer just, let me fill in the gaps. So I think description, widely varies from info dump. And so that's one you kind of want to, I'm not sure that counts towards this.
Go back to Jules Verne.
Yeah.
How much do I need to know about a goddamn sponge?
Oh,
Seriously.
Robert
Seriously.
Jordan and his descriptions of all the women's dresses. I mean, they border on, it's like, oh, wow, come on. Yeah, okay, dress. Yeah, okay, let's go.
But to your point, some people love that.
Yeah.
And if you like it, there's going to be an audience for that. And if you give it to enough people, some people are going to say this is awesome, and another person is going to say not only does this suck, it is wrong, and you won't sell one book.
Yep.
I'm trying to remember. I was trying to find it for this panel because there was a book I read a number of years ago that would go through, and it was hard sci-fi. It wasn't taking itself even seriously, but it would have these long sections of info dump. But at the start of every one of them, it would go in, basically have the too long didn't read. Here's the paragraph of what's important here. But if you want to read the full thing, here you go. Otherwise, restart here.
Wow.
Ooh, just thought of a good example. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. For getting all the information that the reader was going to need in a very humorous and very readable way, and integrated it into the story. I mean, the book is practically part, one of the characters.
All right, guys, before we move to the next question, we are going to check out this week's Indie Connection. So hang tight.
Hey guys, C.O. Cannon here from Fiction Atlas Press, bringing you another Indie Connection. Today I'd like to tell you about some indie books that you might enjoy if you're a fan of Gear Breakers by Zoe Hana Makuta.
The first book I have for you is called Love and Chaos by Poppy Woods. The second collapse changed the world forever. Chris has spent her entire life in her tribe, safe from the pollution that still clings to more populated areas. They grow crops to sell in the cities. They hunt for their meat, and they take care of their own. Their rural way of life ensures the politics of the cities doesn't reach them, until one day it does. Like all orphans, Love Ward has conscripted into the Venus Guard as a child. She has done her best to take the opportunity and make it into a career, something she can be proud of. The Venus Guard is her family. But the New Republic has secrets. The kind of secrets that can get a low-ranking officer like Love reassigned and even killed if she's not careful. When chaos erupts around them, the two women find themselves at odds, but with only each other to rely on. Their shared past and the growing attraction between them can only serve as a distraction as they fight for their lives. Can a guard from the cities and a girl from the tribes expose the New Republic's dirty secrets? Can they change their world without losing their lives? Or their hearts? The second book I have for you is called Adrift in Starlight by Mindy Breyer. When set adrift in the universe, some things are worth holding on to. Titan Valentino has been offered a job they can't refuse. Ty, a gender-neutral courtesan, receives a scandalous proposition: seduce an actor's virgin fiancé. The money is enough to pay off Ty's crushing medical debt, a tantalizing prospect. Too bad Aisha Malik isn't the easy target they expect. A standoffish historian who hates to be touched, she's laser-focused on her career and completely unaware that her marriage has been arranged behind her back. This could be the one instance where Ty's charm and charisma fail them. Then, an accidental heist throws them together as partners in crime. Fleeing from the authorities, they're dragged into one adventure after another. Alien planets, pirate duels, and narrow escapes from the law. As Ty and Aisha open up to each other, deeper feelings kindle between them. But that reward money still hangs over Ty's head. Telling Aisha the truth could ruin everything. Their freedom, their career, and their blossoming love all hang in the balance. To save one might mean sacrificing the rest. The third book I have for you is called Skythane by J. Scott Coatsworth. Jameson Haverkamp, a psych from a conservative religious colony, has come to Oberon. unique among the common worlds, in search of a rare substance called pith. He's guided through the wilds on his quest by Xander Kenosin, a handsome, cocky wingman with a troubled past. Neither knows that Oberon is facing imminent destruction. Even as the world starts to fall apart around them, they have no idea what's coming, or the bond that will develop between them as they race to avert a cataclysm. Together they will journey to uncover the secrets of this strange and singular world, even if it takes them beyond the bounds of reality itself to discover what truly binds them together. And the last book I have for you is called Fall of the Pathfinder by L.C. Lowe. The company controls his life, but not his destiny. Working for ARC in the depths of space, 17-year-old Julian Sastry has struggled in the mines for 2 years to make the family name mean something again. He is a pathfinder, the most dangerous and elite job in the mines, seeking out the richest growths of C6. When he is blamed for an explosion that causes a collapse, he flees into the ruins of Old Easton, the city his father's mistake destroyed a decade ago. The only ally Julian has there is Garrett, a charming thief with secrets of his own. Ark is determined to capture him, and the wasters who live in what's left of the city are more than they appear. Will Julian decide to protect what he truly cares about and find his own path?
Okay, that's all for me this week. I'll see you next week on the Indie Connection. Bye.
All right, guys. So another fun question I have for you is, let me get it. How I had to take notes before this one, guys. There's a lot of interesting questions for this, and we're probably not going to get to all of them. But how do you know when you start info dumping? Like, is there something that kind of like goes off in your brain, or you catch it like in the midst of it?
When I hit the second paragraph talking about something.
Or when the paragraph just, you realize that the paragraph is a page long, you go like,
For me, it's when the voice switches and I hear myself coming in as, hello, I'm going to tell you this now because this is important that you should hear it. And of course, a good editor is going to always go like, get rid of that. Okay.
If the voice changes with the pinky up, you know that it could be bad.
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
And your editor will probably leave you lots of snarky comments about it.
Yeah. Like, does this push the story? Like,
It's the thing you put in there to see if your editor is paying attention.
Making sure they don't zone out in your writing.
By zoning them out with your writing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like Wendy was saying, when the voice changes, when you're no longer speaking in the character's voice, but you're doing some, you're doing that omniscient narrative voice, and yeah.
And AL says everything that's written needs to move the story forward. Yes, that is true.
Maybe if you can break down a paragraph to bullet points, and it makes way too much of a logical sense rather than it being conversational. If it feels like a list, and if you break it down purposely and you go like, this is pretty close to a list, you might be going into that territory.
Yes, so true. So do you guys feel like there is one genre that tends to info dump more than another?
Hard sci-fi. That tends to be because, when you're actually inventing, pseudo-real science, most of those readers want the explanation as to why it works and how it works. So I think, some of that's reader expectation. So I think if you were used to reading a lot of heavy, hard science fiction, you probably don't care. If you're really into like catching asteroids, in your story, and your author is a NASA engineer, you probably are much more forgiving of a 3-page description of how it works than if you're getting a 3-page description about, an encrypted running around New York City.
I think it's anything that is catering to a very niche audience. Like you see a lot of science porn, you see a lot of gun porn in mil-spec, stuff like that. Anything that really caters to that kind of a detailed crowd, you tend to see a lot more of it. But again, that's because it's an expectation of the audience. Describing the feel of the smooth gunmetal blue as it was oiled down last week and needed to be repainted. And
Oh God, yes.
And then someone's gonna be like, yeah, keep on describing that, baby.
Okay, what is that science porn? Because I have no idea what you're talking about.
No,
well,
that
no,
was
that's
gun-
when
that was
it's
gun
just
porn.
lovingly
That was gun
stroking the
porn.
Heisenberg
Okay. So
compensator
what's a science
coil,
porn?
and you're looking at the throbbing dilithium crystals, and the
You have to for it to be any type of porn, it needs the throbbing, probably.
Gosh.
that's one of those things they never told you on Star Trek is that the dilithium crystals throb down there in the chamber. That's why you can see them.
Well,
That's why Scotty.
And you get that with medical stories too.
Yeah.
Especially ones written by doctors because they want to, but the audience, they geek out on that stuff. If you're a medical forensics nerd and you want your book to have a lot of the details so that you can geek out on it. It also is a double-edged sword though, because then if you do it wrong, especially in gun porn, they will tell you and tell you and tell you and tell you and tell you, because you can omit it, but if you make a mistake, you will hear about it from your readers.
I think it really depends on the farther you get away from the here and now reality, whether that's going into fantasy, whether that's going into historical fiction, whether that's going into hard sci-fi. The farther away you get, the more need there is to convince the reader that, yeah, this all makes sense. I mean, especially like Jim said with hard sci-fi, because what you're asking the reader to believe there is, yes, this is possible, it's plausible, and here I'm going to lay it all out for you so that you can see exactly how we got from A to Q, when all of our current science says that you have to stop at B. But genres which are more grounded in the here and now. Think of a thriller. Think of romances. They don't need the info dumps, and when they show up, they're much more jarring. Because it's like it doesn't need to be here. I don't need to know all of the things about this particular part of New York City because I already have a pretty good idea of what New York City is in kind of an abstract way, at least enough for the purposes of the story.
I think that brings up a good point. If you don't need most of the information, it's an info dump and it's a bad one. If you can cut half the stuff out and it'll be just as functional, cut it out. That's when editors come in. In terms of the worst offenders, some people are giving modern examples. I like to go to the classics because we all had to endure these during either high school or college. And I think Homer is a great example because the Odyssey is a compelling story. The Iliad it's a book that is an info dump. There were 700 archers and 1,400 spearsmen, and I don't know how many swordsmen, and so-and-so's brother's cousin and his best friend who just lost a dog, and he worships this goddess, and it's like I've just read 3 pages that left me dumb. And what's fascinating is that this is supposed to be easy to remember because this was when it was oral history and people were saying this. So my question is, were people just constantly botching the amount of archers and spearsmen or stuff like that? Or are they using that as an exercise to try to figure out what was the next part of the story? Because this part is more complex, but those two, oh Lord. And when you go into historical fantasy, whatever thing historical, that's when they fetishize their research so much that they just overdo it.
Well, but I think the Odyssey and the Iliad are a different beast because I don't think they were written for entertainment purposes. I really think they were more of a way of tracking history, as opposed to, straight up, they weren't, when the ancient Greeks were writing books, they were, it was to record history, and if they embellished it a little bit, so be it. But
that's the point. I think the Iliad is historical,
Yeah.
and that's when they go into that, and the Odyssey is entertainment.
Right.
And again, it's just a compelling narrative. They talk about monsters and cyclops and stuff like that,
Yeah.
and you go like, whatever. And to your point, spot on. Again, historical, and people need to be factual. But how many spearsmen can you give a shit about?
Well, so I was just going through a piece talking about, since we're going to ancient Greece, and I had to pull up my notes on it. It was the story written by Lucian of Samosata, known as A True Story, because basically what it was a satire of all of the times travel logs. It was a combination of a travel log and one of the morality tales combined, where he comes in and starts out with the first couple of pages are nothing but none of this happened. This is all a lie. It's absolute BS, and it is a parody of all the different travel guides and the adventure stories and the things of the time, where it goes more and more and more absurd, and parts of it are written as info dumps as if to look at his own people of the time and go and say, how full of bullshit can you be and have people continue to expect it? Oh, wait, people are still buying it. And what I loved about the story is he gets down to the point where he still hasn't gotten home, which is, of course, where every epic gets to. He gets to the one point and he says, and we'll talk about the rest at another time. It's, I mean, it's absolutely a beautiful trolling story picking on the fiction of the time. So none of this is new. We've all been giving our own people shit for forever.
That's true. That is true. So, Joe says, I am your father's brother's nephew's cousin's former roommate. So what does that make us? Absolutely nothing. Kudos to JD invoking a pseudo Spaceballs reference this morning.
Yeah. And any
on
day
that
where you
note,
can
guys,
say Spaceballs is a good day.
Yes, we're going to wrap this up. Let's go back around the round table and tell our viewers where they can find you. We are going to start with Patrick.
I am Patrick Dugan. You can find me at patrickdugan.net. You can also find me at distracteddragon.com and educateddragon.com.
Nice. Jim?
The easiest thing to do is to find me at jamespnettles.com, which will link you to most of everything else, or at least it will when I finish doing the new build. But you can also join us at continualconvention.com if you like these kinds of panels. You can find me at creatingpros.com for the podcast and the video cast, where I just had JD on not long ago. We were talking about language. You can find me at the speculativefictionacademy.com if you're interested in classes on writing. We're up to about 70 instructors. You can also find my classes at authoressentials.net and authoressentialsworkshops.com. And of course, over at Educated Dragon and Distracted Dragon too.
All right.
I don't have nearly as many .coms as Jim does. You can find me at CassidyChronicles.com for all of the books, my blog, updates. If you are a person who goes to conventions, you can find out there where I'm going to show up. Next weekend, I'm at Cosine up in Colorado Springs with our lovely hostess, Maddie. And and the books are available wide. I think I only have one in KU. So, buy them at your favorite bookstore.
Yeah.
Greetings, fellow humans. JD Estrada Writer. Look for me on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook, on the YouTubes. If you look for that, you're going to find me. If you look for JD Estrada, you might find someone from the Philippines, because apparently Estrada is a very common surname in the Philippines. Two things that I want to do. First off, it's the first show that I do in the year. So I do want to say, if you can read here, that says Cheers, Mama Estrada. And I am wearing this t-shirt, and I have these two notebooks from a really good friend of mine called Freddy Fajardo. He's a fellow artist. We used to be coworkers and whatnot. He's a really good friend. He actually went through pancreatic surgery this week. I'm wishing him all the best. I'm toasting to his health. And I learned with Mom that I like to toast to good health and keep it cheeky and keep it light, because that's thoughts and prayers are great, but sometimes you need a laugh and a smile. And for my books, I'm just going to highlight two parts of the poetic spectrum that I have. I have 19 books out, but these are two of them. This is a great Mother's Day gift, or just a gift for, to keep it sweet. It's ballads of hope and joy. It's positive poetry. And if you're a little more on the Wicked side, Rhymes from the Wicked Nursery are over 80 original nursery rhymes that are worthy of the Addams Family collection.
Nice. And I'm Madilynn Dale, guys. I'm your host for the day. You can find all of my books at my website, thechaptergoddess.com. Like Adam mentioned, I'm going to be at Cosign in Colorado this coming weekend. I'm really excited. It's going to be a fun drive. But check out my Ember series. Oh, this side. Blue Flames is dropping at the end of the month, and you can get it for pre-order, as well as the first book in the series for 99 cents right now. And also, while I have your attention, hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't. We're fixing to go to the last 5 minutes and spend it with Miss Wendy as she shares with us a bit about what she's got going on. So here you go, Wendy.
All right. Well, thank you. I guess I can just say I'm at bluehavenpress.com, which is my little indie label. And so just, because we're talking about info dumps and series and everything else, I thought I would give you a chance to see if this works for you or not. I'm going to just read the first page or so in To Kill a King, which is the 4th book in the Hollystone Mysteries, and I'm writing book 5 right now. So there's a little bit of a spoiler clue here from book 3, but this is how you have to do it. So you have to come in and start somewhere with introducing the character. So this is called Weary Hearted, and it takes place at autumn equinox. And I'm telling you that. So here comes my voice. Estrada rose through the gray veils between night and morning, with images of Michael flooding his mind and firing his body. Dozing on his side, he basked in the heat until desire overcame him, and he flung back an arm to draw his lover in. The hair on his arms quivered with the cool rush of morning air, and then his hand hit a dent in the sheet where Michael should have been. Shocked, fully conscious by the reality of the moment, he rolled into the empty space, sniffed, and rubbed his eyes. Tears came unexpectedly and at the strangest times. A whiff of espresso could trigger an aching throat. The scent of a cigarette on the wind or the click of a Zippo could send silent tears streaming down his cheeks. He still carried Michael's silver monogram lighter in the pocket of his leather jacket. Jesus, how long had it been? Long months marked off days, days stretched into weeks. August 9th, that was the night Michael sacrificed himself to save Estrada's soul. Bloody hell, Michael, why did you do that? They cremated him 3 days later in secret. Images flashed through Estrada's mind, that bloody vampire drilling its beak into Michael's brain, the knowing look on Nigel's face when he saw his grandson's body limp in Estrada's arms. The billiard table in Nigel's den where they laid Michael out, his pale, perfect face, all shadows and harsh angles, a black scarf tied around his forehead to hide his shattered skull. 6 weeks had passed, and Michael wasn't coming back. Estrada flexed his bicep and stared at his latest tattoo, Corvus Corax. The raven's back broke into a flurry of feathers and deranged birds to remind him how he'd split the terror asunder with the force of his right arm. He could still feel the damp steel, the hot blood, the hollow pit of his pulsing gut as he struck. The raven held a bloody rose in its beak so he'd never forget how close he'd come to losing his baby girl, how he'd lost his best friend and lover. Oh, fuck it, enough wallowing. So that is the beginning of book 4. And I'm just going to quickly show you that this is the actual tattoo. Can you see this? I'm so terrible at this. But this is the tattoo. And all of these books, the Hollystone Mysteries, are designed by a graphic artist, and they're all tattoos that the characters wear in the series. So we had a lot of fun doing that, and I really enjoy it. So I don't know what else I should tell you other than please do come by and my website. That's where you can find my social media. YouTube, I have book trailers for all of these books on there now. And I've just started uploading audiobooks on Google Play, and that's a lot of fun. And yeah, you can just find me and follow me. And I'm having a lot of fun writing book 5 now, which is a continuation of this story, but there's a time travel thing and it's all crazy. So yeah, info sprinkles in there a little bit. Anyway, I'm just going to say, hey, it's always time to go indie now.